Hi everyone, I am Jessica and I am doing my presentation today on Asian Americans. So we'll start with demographics. So when we talk about Asian Americans, we're talking about Americans from Chinese, Filipino, Asian Indian, Vietnamese, Korean, and Japanese descent. And in 2018, they were about 22.6 million Asian Americans, and by 2050, they're projected to be 9% of the US population. Now, success financially, economically, are values of the Asian American culture, and so they are very successful for a minority group. And in 2002, a white family median income was $54,461. And the Asian American median income in 2002 was $65,469. And they also made up 30% of minority business owners. So they are very successful for a minority group. Now, when we look at their values, the family unit is valued over the individual. And this is really big because everything has a hierarchy. Okay, so it is a highly structured family unit. And so fathers work outside the home and are the ultimate authority and the protector of the family. Now, mothers oversee the home and care for the children, but they're under the authority of their personal fathers as well as their husband and their in-laws as well. And even in some cases, their own sons, they are under the authority of them as well. Now, they really value interdependence and peacefulness within the family unit. And this really reinforces their rituals and their culture. So some of these rituals would include like ancestor worship and family celebrations, genealogy records, and funeral rites. Children are highly prized, especially males, and children are often raised by extended families, and they're expected to be obedient and respectful to their elders. Now, as we move on to characteristics, elders are respected above everyone. This is super, super important to the Asian American family. Their biggest struggles are with intergenerational pressures and cultural differences. So when an Asian American child goes off to college or high school, they see how other children are living and they crave that. And family tends to put a lot of pressure on them to be successful in their academics. So those are some issues that might end up bringing a Asian American into counseling, but ultimately they want to handle things in the family unit. Keeping personal life private and issues within the family is deeply valued, and they typically don't trust outsiders. Sometimes there's a case where a family doctor who is of white descent or other descent is trusted over years of time, but mostly they don't trust those who aren't within the Asian American community. They have come from a lot of struggle, and so this is how they survived, was depending upon each other. So they would rather depend on the family unit rather than depend on outside. Now, there was an interview with Dan Hakoy. He has a PhD in clinical psychology. And that was the interview in the textbook Cultural Diversity by Jerry Diller. And he talked about how Asian Americans were the first immigrants to the United States. We had the African Americans and other minority groups here, like the Indians and Latinos, but the African Americans were here because we brought them here by force into slavery. The Indian Americans were being pushed out of their homes, and the Latino Americans also immigrated here by choice, just like the Asian Americans. But the Asian Americans were definitely one of the firsts. As I said before, Asian Americans don't trust outsiders, and Dan Hakoy definitely reiterated that, and how important it is to handle things within the family unit. And he talked a lot about how very few will seek help outside of the family, and when they do, it's typically out of desperation because they can't get help within the family or within the Asian American community. He talks about how in therapy sessions, how Asian Americans typically won't give the whole side of the story, and typically it takes time to build their trust to get the whole story. And then Asian Americans will typically notice facial expressions and subtle body gestures a lot more in therapy. And because it's not something that they typically do, it should never be assumed that they know what the client and therapist relationship is, and should always be explained. The last thing I wanted to talk about is this picture here. So family hierarchy is a big thing, and elders should always be respected. As we look at this picture at the dinner table, we see that the elder is at the head of the table. This is a sign of respect. And then down from there, you have the adults and then the children. This is just a great photo example of the hierarchy. So as we wrap up, we know that the Asian American community is a very complex, close-knit, and somewhat closed-off group. And so they're complex, and it takes understanding their culture to truly be able to help them. And so when the opportunity arises to help somebody from the Asian American community, we need to be understanding and also understand their culture to be able to effectively help them to the best of our abilities. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. And then here are my references.